Hello everyone, I'm Angela.
And I'm Brooke from Burnley and Trowbridge.
In February of 2025, we had a special opportunity to bring our hands-on workshops to Gloucester, England, along with 2 fun-filled weekends of 18th century sewings hosted at the Gloucester Cathedral. We also collaborated with Gloucester Museum to present a personal behind-the-scenes tour of several pieces from their collection.
Gloucester Museum's unique collection first came to light when Janet Arnold studied and published 2 of the museum's early 19th century pieces in her book, Patterns of Fashion 1, as well as a later 19th century piece in Patterns of Fashion 2. In our tour, we highlighted one of these well-known pieces, along with sharing details of several lesser-known garments, including textiles, construction, and even ownership.
In this video, we take you along with our students to delve into these interesting garments. This is a hand-painted Chinese silk. We think it's probably 1770s because it's not a very wide pleating in this area, and some of the trimming that's been done as far as the sleeve flounces and that sort of thing. As you can see, it's in very sad shape, and this would be one of the pieces that I personally would like to see go into conservation and be stabilized and preserved so that it doesn't further deteriorate. Unfortunately, what we discover a lot of times with these is if they stay in a family or what have you, or even not, they become masquerade costume at some point, which adds to the degradation of the piece. Chinese hand-painted silks were highly desired. They were very expensive. This would have been a very expensive gown worn by a woman of quality. If you look, you can see some of the remnants of color, the bright blue. You can see how bright this originally was.
Why have some of the pink flowers
Degraded
to almost brown?
It would depend on how they were, the receipt that was used. This is actually not brown. That is a purple that has turned more of a brown, because purple tends to go brown. And you see purples that range from a really pinky purple to a very indigo purple, more of a almost navy. And they are painting on silk from early on. I was just in the Gloucester library, and there are actually dye receipts from the medieval period on painted dyes in order to paint on cloth. As far as the construction of it, it's classic, and it hasn't been mucked about. So
Angela was mentioning the construction's pretty typical, and when we say that, we're talking about the pleats in the back. You see sacques, or negligées as they were called as well in England in the 18th century, had these box pleats. There's 2 pleats towards the center. There's 2 visible pleats away from the center, and there is a extra hidden pleat that helps the fabric flow out and train behind. What isn't typical on this one is that instead of this piece of fabric in the bodice continuing on straight through, they've actually slit it here at the waist and pleated it the way we're going to see on 2 of the other gowns. And this is something that starts in the mid to late 1770s, early 80s. That makes this piece pretty unique and special, not just the fabric, but the construction of it is not as common just in this section. Everything else about it, pretty normal. But you can see these beautiful curved side seams to fit it, and they're pretty far to the back. Earlier sacques had their side seam here, right where the pocket slit split apart to go out over a large hoop. But by the late 70s, early 80s, they're doing more pads and rumps back here, and so having the side seam further back is completely fine.
right.
But we still have the sleeve ruffles here. These are just double, and then they'd have lace or gauze ruffles beneath them, so that look you see in portraits where it's sort of trailing off the elbow.
And the trim on this It's rather simple. This is a chenille, and chenille was incredibly popular in the 18th century, and it was especially popular mid-century, into the 60s or so, but here we are looking at the late 70s, and still this chenille is being used.
Now we're not going to flip this whole gown over because it's so delicate, but I do want to step over here, and if that's all right with you, just reach out to show you the front edge of the skirt, which is trimmed. The gown, it's possible the gown was remade because the front is center front closing with eyelets to lace.
What I was going to ask.
But you do see that in the late 1770s when you're seeing this waistline.
That's what
And yet they're still fully trimming the front. And this curve down here is very typical, a lot of day gowns and fashionable semi-formal gowns in the 1770s and 80s.
Right.
The fact that this trim is not just down the front, but it comes down and curves.
Around, exactly. And just a word of note, this was added later. This bobinette
The
lace
lace, yeah.
is added later.
But yeah, feel free to come over and look at the trim. It's just little tucks with running stitches down the center. It's not a lot. It's not very fine work. It was probably done pretty quickly. It doesn't take a lot of fabric to do that kind of trim.
Another element, just to show you, and you can see it well in here, is the glazed linen. Now, a glazed linen was usually used on nicer gowns, more expensive gowns. This one is fully lined with glazed linen, so it doesn't have a combination of a cheap linen and then glazing, for example, in the sleeves. Because this is a 70s, maybe early 80s gown, it has a much tighter fitting arm, and the glazed linen would have allowed it to slide in very easily. And the fact that it's fully lined in a glazed linen is just lovely.
Just the glaze is still on it. It's still
It has a very bright glaze, and the glazing would have been done just through beetling. So this petticoat, right away, it has had a new waistband put on it. Obviously, it's deteriorated quite a bit, so you don't really want to look at the stitching and how this was done and attached to this because it was done at some later period. What's wonderful about it is the fact that it remains. The entire garment remains together, which is unusual. The other thing is the trim. Talk about the trim a little bit, Brooke.
The fact that it goes almost all the way up to
the
it
waist the knee.
I haven't had a chance yet to measure what this is waist to hem versus the gown. Because I have to wonder if it's lost a little of its length because it's unusual to have the trim come this close to the waist in the 1770s.
Or trim on the edge.
And the trim down.
In 1920.
Do you think it's lost volume as well?
There's more in the back.
Yeah, there's a whole lot more in the back than there
So
is
it's
in the
not
front.
spread half and half.
Yeah.
And most
Yes, that's why.
petticoats
It's tucked
at this
under.
time aren't half and half. You tend to find maybe 2 panels in the front and 3 to the back, or 3 going slightly around the hoop, because you want this to lay flat, hang flat, to appear between the trim, and you don't want the petticoat rumpling in the front and then you losing all of this.
Right.
And so you can see it's graduated from the bottom trim and slightly gets narrower here,
And
it's
then
narrower
narrower
here.
here.
Reflects the curve of the skirt.
Yeah.
It's all been tacked at this point, so you're following the curve here. But you've got all of this free.
Would have been really.
So you wonder how much it would have sat away from the petticoat to give more dimension to it. It's a beautiful damask, and it is a later damask. It is light. It's got a wonderful hand to it. It has a bright sheen to it. It still maintains the aspect of some of your 1750s, 60s design with some of the larger flowers and things, but what it adds in is the elements of the little garlands that you can see running through it. But this is a classic, and from a standpoint of using damask, those continue to be popular. There's not a, you can't say definitively because it's a damask silk gown, it was this time frame. You can judge it more from the patterns, but this one does have rather large patterns on it. And it could have been a slightly earlier textile, but the weight of it leads me to believe that it is something that was made 60s later. These again, this is cotton, this is a later edition.
What do you think would have been, or would they not have had anything?
It would have had a separate flounce. If they put a
right.
ruffle in, it could be made of a number of different things. It
Yeah.
could be lace,
Okay, the ruffles came in and
Yeah.
out. A lot of them are just whipped to a linen tape.
and then they're whipped in. We look at this carefully, we might find that there are pricks from having ruffles and things added into the neckline at some point in time.
It's gorgeous.
So
And
Brooke
it's
made
so
an
light.
observation with this one, and go ahead, that it's slightly earlier than the next one we're gonna look at.
Yeah, and this, I mean, both of the ones that we're going to look at are probably 1770s, 1780s. This one's not as early as some that survive because the pleats are between the shoulders. Earlier ones in the 1750s and 60s, these pleats, there's a lot more fabric here before the pleats start to happen, and they tend to go where the pleats go right into the shoulder straps. But these are pretty narrow, but they're not so narrow that they seem 1780s. It's also not a lot of depth from the waist down. It's pretty shallow, but it does have really tiny pleats that you start to see in the 1770s. It has this really nice high armscye here in the back, like I was talking to some of you about in the workshop, that if this is really high and straight, you have a lot of ease. And so while you're wearing this over a stiffened pair of stays, so it has a smooth shape, you do still have some ability to move around, especially if you're dancing. But these are just beautifully set sleeves. And the sleeve ruffles also dated towards the 1770s when they were still using those as opposed to cuffs or trim going up the arm, as you see in the later 70s, early 80s. And it's just a very simple trim as well. It's straight pinked edges. It's not even curved pinking. Pinking was done with a chisel
Like
that
this.
you hit, that you sit on the fabric and hit with a mallet. And a lot of them had shapes to them.
Right,
But these,
typically a scallop shape.
yeah, but these are
Straight.
Straight. They still have the little indentations. And this is necessary because the stays that they were wearing allowed for the waist to drop lower, and so the natural waist is actually somewhere
Right
right up
there.
there.
Yeah.
But by letting this flare out,
You've got lovely
this allows it to slip down and give you a longer waistline,
Right.
which makes you look smaller.
This was a center front closing gown. And you can see it still retains its original shape, a nice little curved front. And this was added because somebody wanted to wear it for masquerade.
They also, to make it fit, they also added a little dart here.
Right.
So you can see this is probably being worn in the 1870s and 80s when
Right.
it needed to fit.
And that
a
was
corset.
very popular. The Victorians just loved taking 18th century clothes and mucking about with them.
So that they could wear them in public.
Yeah, well, it was, for costume, it was for
Yeah, yeah.
masquerade. In here you have your typical linen lining, it's an inexpensive linen lining. Now, I want to look at that under microscope, but it does appear to be linen, but it's been very well worn. The other thing that you might find in here would be a linen cotton, which was classically made in the Manchester region throughout the 18th century, and could be made inexpensive, more inexpensively than an all cotton as when we get into the last of the 18th century. It has very classic construction,
And you'll see more of the interior construction on the other one that's almost
right, this one.
identical. One of the
bless you.
things that you'll notice with these garments is that a lot of the seams, especially the skirt seams, are just running stitches. A lot of the hems are running stitches. The backs are these little space back stitches, but the underarm seam on the sleeve is your best back stitching that you're going to
Right,
see in the
and
entire
you see
garment.
this is all hand stitched. If you guys want to take a close up, it's all hand stitched, but it looks like machine stitch, but it's not.
precise.
Yeah.
But you do have a lot of wear. And
Um,
It's the
yes,
strap.
And I do want to bring
Yeah.
something up because we have people asking us all the time from a standpoint of purchasing silk thread. You're going to see that you can see the thread. This thread is the weight of what you or I would call a modern quilting silk thread. This was very typical of the thread being used at that point in time. This is the creme de la creme that when I showed Brooke a picture, she was like, and I was, when I saw it in collection, because it's so nicely done and it's so nicely preserved. This is a real classic stripe pattern that you see later in the 18th century of this gradiated coloring. And you will, now this is balanced, but you'll also see unbalanced stripes.
So on this one, you can see the interior first, completely laid out, and it's very typical late 70s, early 80s, 2 pieces in the back, 2 pieces in the front. It's actually perhaps bigger than you would realize. Her waistline is 30 inches, and we measured the chest around 37, 38 inches. So it is shorter though. Her back here is this is about 14 inches, but it's about 11 inches from the back to the waist. So it's a little bit deeper. You'll see on the outside. It's not quite as deep as you see in the late 1780s, where they really drop down beneath a split rump, but it does have this nice curve that you see here. So not only is it's very small pleats, they're about a quarter-inch visible on each pleat on the outside. I haven't counted them yet, but I'm going to. I want to see how many are on each side. I doubt it'll be the same. It's usually not that perfect that it's completely balanced.
Yeah.
But we've got 2 rows of tacking stitches to help control those pleats.
Right.
And that's not something you see earlier when there's a lot less pleats.
Plating, right.
There's some gowns I've seen from the 1760s that might have 6 pleats on one side and 7 on the other, and they're huge. So this is part of what helps you date something like this when it's these tiny little pleats. There's been some alteration under the arm. One side has multiple rows of stitching. There's some piecing going in on the seam. There's also piecing on the shoulder strap. There's piecing in the back neckline binding.
Is there boning in the center?
There's not boning in the center now, but there probably was.
Right.
Yeah.
And so actually with this one, they folded back the lining, they stitched the boning channels, put pieces of baleen in there to help keep it really straight up against the back.
Right. So
The
you can see.
lining,
Yeah.
the lining is cut straight. The gray line is running completely straight down. This is
Right.
completely
Okay.
straight down. This could have been even the selvage in here. Usually you back stitch the center back seam. This one they just butted it and whipped it. Goes together quite quickly that way. And then another thing you'll notice is the skirts on
Have
both
the
sides have these little loops
Ah.
that a ribbon can go through to pull the skirts up.
This is something you start to see in the 70s. This is a beautiful interior. Oftentimes you'll find with gowns that they're not necessarily as beautiful. You'll find things unfinished or extra fabric left, especially if you see alterations. Yes.
So you can see that the grain of the fabric runs straight from the shoulders down to the waist. But the front has this beautiful angle because they're starting to wear stays in the 1770s and 80s that give more sort of a swooped front. And so the fabric starts to angle slightly as it goes down. And you can see actually a little bit of almost a curve
Yeah.
of where the bust is in a little bit and then back out again.
Right.
And then the elbow, the sleeves, you can see the difference in these sleeves
Yeah.
from the other ones. You can see
Right.
how straight the sleeve is and there's no shaping in it. But then there's these little tucks that were done and tacked so that it brings it up.
It literally was to pull it up at the elbow.
Let's turn this over. You've got the side seams, so you have the fabric from the front that's angling into the side seam. And then the center seam has a slight shaping here to get this V. And then the pleat on the outer pleat is completely straight on grain. But this inner pleat here, while straight down here, it starts to slip out a little bit, and then they add a little bit more to the fold here. And so it creates this beautiful chevron. This is not what's going on the inside of the lining, but they deliberately played around with the stripes to create this beautiful look that's just...
Shoulder straps, are they put on the sleeves, or the sleeves are sewn in all the way around?
The lining is whipped on the inside, the sleeve top is slid in, and then the shoulder strap is tacked down over top.
Okay, right.
The sleeve
This
is
one has been
back
pieced,
stitched
you
in
can see.
well up above the shoulder
then
strap.
So from a distance.
In
you'd
dealing
never
with,
guess that.
a small stripe like that, they want to do all the things that will make it aesthetically look lovely, and it's easy to do when you're constructing in that manner. I'd like to introduce fellow friend and fashion historian Brenda Rosso. Her career of many years has been spent studying and producing men's and women's clothing of the 17th and 18th century. She will be leading the men's portion of this study.
So this is a men's embroidered waistcoat, and we know who owned these two. They belong to a Thomas Fisher who lived in Caldecott. So, this one dates probably to the late 70s or early 80s, and that one dates to the late 70s. So they're contemporary with each other, but you can see that the cut is slightly different. So the way that this would have been manufactured is that it would have been a flat panel, and then it would have been embroidered onto it, and then it would be cut into the waistcoat shape, and then made up, probably by a tailor, like the tailor of Gloucester.
Like the tailor of Gloucester, exactly.
And that waistcoat, if you don't know, that waistcoat that's illustrated in the Beatrix Potter books actually survives at the V&A, as does the patent layer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, she used both of those as her examples when she did the illustration.
But it's really lovely, and we can tell that it's late 70s because of the shape of the pocket flap. It's really, really extreme. But it's really, really beautifully done, and the buttonholes are absolutely perfect.
The buttons have been embroidered as well.
Yes.
And if you look at the embroidery up close, you'll see that these are tiny metal spangles.
Yeah,
And
little
each
spangles.
one, the embroidery is a professional embroiderer.
Oh,
This
yes.
is not something somebody did at home. This was done by a professional embroiderer. It was commissioned to be embroidered and then bought
Or you could have bought it
as panels.
as a panel, and had a tailor make it up for you.
Right.
But it has this really little lovely metal thread as the vine. And then there's a tiny, the little metal thread is running through the vein of the leaves.
No.
And small, itty, teeny, weeny little things. That's really charming.
It really is a charming piece.
And it's in excellent condition. It's really,
is.
except for the staining, it's in very good condition.
Right. So this one is a silk satin, and it just so happens, and Brenda pointed this out because I wasn't paying attention, that this man just thought he would be a hoo-ha, and he fully lined, well, not fully lined, but he faced in a washing silk or a lightweight silk that is used for lining. But then he went so far as to say, well, you know what, because I can, I'm going to do the back in silk, which is not typical. Because if you recall, in the 18th century, men are typically not seen without their coats on. So they typically use an inexpensive linen or a linen cotton, something like that, for the back. He decided he would just do it in silk. So that way, when he was at home at his leisure, he could take off his coat with his friends around, let them notice his back, and then put on his banyan and his slippers and haute court. So we're going to talk about the textile first. If you notice this wonderful textile, it is woven. This is called a dimity. This is pretty much a standard dimity. Striped dimities were really common. You see them used in clothing and in household items. Manchester area is well known for their dimities. and they did a multitude of harness weaves that fell into the Dimity family. This one is created with a plain stitch and then a floating stitch to create the actual, or a floating weave to create the actual stripe. So it raises it slightly. From what I can tell with just a loop, it appears to be cotton, but it could still be a linen and cotton, because I've looked at books that date from the 70s on into the very early 80s that I'm still able to look down and see that they are using linen as the warp yarn. So we're going through that transition of going to all cotton textiles. They do become all cotton. So if you hear the word Dimity, 18th century, it can be a linen and cotton, or a cotton, because India is doing all cotton dimities. But if you go into the 19th century, that's where you start to see an all cotton dimity. This one also is just lined with an inexpensive linen, but the dimity exists on the inside because, as you can see, it can fold back. It can be as so, or it can fold back, but this is typically how he probably would have worn it, buttoning to this point. Also, there was one other thing that I wanted to show. I wanted to show you how white it actually was.
Oh,
So you can
What's
see.
a lovely creamy colour.
Yeah, it's a natural white. You don't see optic white like we see in the modern
Like a
textiles,
white
but I find it
Would that be waterproof?
very typical that our customers want that optic white. They just don't think it's right if it's not optic. But the natural white is more correct for the time.
So the date on this probably dates to the late 70s, and you can see the transitional style. It's the beginning of a collar, and they've done this collar. It's very clever. It's just cut. It's not a separate. It's not a separate piece. So it's just the shape of the waistcoat front that gives it this little teeny collar. That's why I date it to the late 70s, early 80s. But it's double-breasted. The interesting thing about it is this construction, and you see it has a straight edge, and that's, you're going to see more and more and more of
Right,
that.
that's your transition.
Yeah. But the interesting thing about it is there's a seam right here on both sides. And it's clever the way that they've constructed it. Do you see? So that's the end of the fabric. And then they've just added this piece, but they've shaped it slightly. And again, this would have been embroidered flat, probably sold as a panel, with the little round rondels of the buttons.
Yeah.
And the same sort of colorway. This is probably a silver gilt, so this was probably meant to be golder. This is silver. This is probably a gilt. But the green, he's using green again. He must have been very, very fond of natural forms. But again, you see this sort of what begins, to be, that you begin to see in the federal, what we call the
Federal period, yeah, what we
you
call.
call the Regency.
Yeah. It's the long Georgian period
The
too.
long Georgian.
So,
But it's lovely.
What's the back on this one?
It's just a plain linen.
this one is just a plain linen bag. So, this would have been, the dimity, again, I think the choice of the dimity, this is more of a dress waistcoat. The choice of the dimity is leaning towards, as we're heading into the end of the 18th century, where they're going for these lighter fabrics. We are starting to get a lot more textiles that are readily available, that are washable. Of course, this wouldn't be washable because he's added all this amazing embroidery, but these sort of textiles are becoming more popular as you get into the 80s. This is a beautiful silk. It is a brocaded silk with a small sprig in it. It probably would have been considered to be a lutestring. You see figured lutestrings. It has been called out in the collection as a sarcenet, which makes sense as well. Although the sarsenets that I've seen in Regencies tend to be a little softer than this, and this has got a really crisp feel to it, which lutestring has.
It's
So that-
originally
okay.
sack, like the one over there with the pleats in the back that flow loose, and then very fitted here. It probably didn't have the waist seam in the back. It probably just flowed all the way through. And underneath those hidden pleats, there's usually a row of stitching to hold the back smooth to the lining. This one has a little casing on right where that would be that probably had boning in it to hold it even smoother to the back. So these are not seams. These are just channels right there. Exactly. Now, when these gowns are made, and this is something that the people who were in the workshop this weekend got to do, is we usually cut the lining first, and many times it's completely whipped together, and then the gown is built on top of that. And you can see that here, how even though the back has been taken off, these side seams are completely intact, and so they didn't even have to. The front part has come off of it because it was unpicked. But these didn't come apart, so it was obviously done before. And I'll turn this over lightly.
That's just crazy being able to see the back from the outside. The
Yeah,
lining.
from the
It's
inside.
not
normal.
Yeah.
So you can see on the inside here, and this one is cut with a sort of folded robing that I'll show you in a moment, but the lining, this is where it would come to about here on the body. This would be pinned to the stays, and then a stomacher, a triangular piece, can be laid over top of that, and then the robing, these pleated bits, sort of cover the edge of the stomacher to give a very V-shaped front. And then it's just a mess up in here of tucks and darts and pleats and selvage. Yes, right there. You can see the selvage of the gown is tucked right in there
Of the,
of the fabric.
and the mess is really a result of fitting.
And on this side, I think this is the side you said, on here, a little bit of the robing has come unstitched
Right.
so that you can
So you can
see
see
how the shoulder, the sleeve was just slid up over the lining and tacked in.
And that is, a typical construction method. It gives a much better fit than our modern way of putting right sides to right
Yeah.
sides and making you see.
And then this lovely front, this is the robing.
And it's so folded.
It's just folded, it's very little fabric, it comes over stitches, and then just a little bit to turn it back to create that front. Inside these beautiful sleeves with their 2 rows of ruffles are not just one weight, but 2 weights.
And they're huge.
Yes,
They're
and they are
absolutely
very
huge.
heavy.
And they are contemporary to the piece. It's not something that was added later.
Yeah.
Wow.
And they're on, usually when you see these, they're on the back of the elbow, and it helps hold the sleeve down to the back. And I've never seen 2 like this before where they're on either side. But it is really going to help that sleeve hang down where it needs to. It'll keep it smoother. The original gown had a waist seam here to go into this, which would have been the front of the gown. Which is now no longer on the gown, but on a completely different gown from,
Probably, I would
40 years later, maybe? 30, 40 years?
it would be teens is my guess. But what's really wonderful about this, we'll talk about this construction because it's got some odd bits going on. But what's really wonderful about this, if you look at this, there was a lot of care taken in the unpicking of the original gown, and then in the construction to retain some of the elements of the original gown in the new gown. So if we had that woman's story, my guess is, because we're looking at a rather, and Brenda pointed this out, a rather large bust, and some fairly large arms, that this is probably something that was created for a woman who possibly owned this in her young life and then wanted to recreate it for a special occasion as an elderly woman or an older woman. But it's just such a sweet gown. It's rather a mess in here too. There was some really interesting some get it done kind of construction going on in this piece.
And you have a drawstring on the.
Yeah,
on the
there
neck
is a
also,
drawstring.
Even if
Now,
it's
this-
for clothing.
Right, this is a very wide neckline. And you do see
Okay.
sometimes this happening as a fitting in order to cinch it up just a little bit to keep it so that it's on the shoulder, because you can see this is a very narrow shoulder. But you don't want it to slip off the shoulder because you've got a corset on and you want to keep that corset hidden as well.
I just love how this is completely, the trim is completely loose,
Yeah,
except at the waist.
it just hangs there because she
Right.
didn't want to give it up.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it's just
So,
the
I mean,
panel.
it's
not
possible,
attached.
it's possible that, you know, she didn't always wear it with this attached,
Yeah.
that,
That could be,
You would have
and
liked
that's
that
why
based
this is the puzzle, this area right in here, as to how this would have been originally constructed in order to wear it properly. So this one, we want to do a lot more research on, and see if we can puzzle out its story. It could be that someone at some point in time decided it was a good idea that these were in a box with this and to tack them on.
yeah.
So that could be as well. So it, again, this begs for us to look at it carefully. And when you are analyzing a garment like this that has gone through these gyrations, you look for small things like stitch marks, et cetera, and you draw and you draw and you draw and you measure, and then maybe you don't figure it out or you do.
And then there's this piece over here,
Right.
which is a spencer, a little bodice that can be worn over, perhaps this when it didn't have all the trim on it, or over a white muslin gown with tucks at the hem. And this is constructed really interesting. The sleeves are pretty typical for late teens, early 20s, just
Yeah.
sort of the fullness here. Down here at the wrist, this beautiful little button, and I love the
And
ribbon.
the extensions
and
down
pleat-
onto the hand.
the pleats here. But the arm size of it are very unique, where the fabric is sort of gathered here above the bust and below, and it flows right into, it's not all in one, but it angles up to here. But this part, it's just these triangles, these points that sort of go over top of where it fits in. And it's really neat.
It's just a detail
Yeah,
that's been created.
but it's
And they
beautiful
set-
how this, instead of making the triangles
Yeah.
separate,
Yeah.
they flow right from the top of the bodice over top of the sleeve.
So would that fabric have been harvested as well?
Yes, and that's
Good.
another part of,
Yeah.
you know, analyzing it
Yeah.
and figuring out where that came from. So this one, textile-wise, this is a beautiful sarsenet. It's a perfect example. It has rather than a lot of the sarsenets you see will have these tiny little figures, this has a beautiful overall swirly flower pattern. It's gorgeous. It's classic construction for the time frame.
Oh, yeah.
All of the details, the Van Dykes, the double gathered sleeve puffs in the top, the added elements where you've got the very tiny cording and the added elements of the tabs. That seems to be really popular.
Yeah.
You see it in garments, you see it in pelisse, you know, you see it in gowns, you see it in pelisses,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, we've got all these little bias cut bands are also piped with bias cut satin.
and we worked out how these are done.
Yeah.
And it's not nearly as fiddly as it appears.
It's just
so.
still a lot of piping.
Would this need any kind of sleeve supports inside it?
Again, I'm not here, and this has probably been stuffed. Has this been stuffed? Does it have any original netting in it or anything? Yeah, then it would depend. It could actually have linen that has been starched. That could be a support that goes inside. I don't know that it would have a complete, like arm
like
puff.
later, like the
Yeah,
30s.
yeah.
Okay.
More likely, it would be something like a bobinette that had been starched, or a lightweight linen that had been starched to create that support.
What you do have at the hem that gives it a lot of fullness
Yeah.
is not just the trim that has the rouleau that is along the edge of these. Obviously, we have these little tabs that are made out of bits of silk. But down here at the bottom, the hem is padded, and then above the padded hem is another row of rouleau. That's just, it's the satin fabric that's sort of wrapped around wool, which you can see quite easily as it's starting to shred on one side. It's not as shredded on that side.
Or,
But that really does kick it out nicely.
And you get that bell shape that's so classic for this time period.
Most of the skirt has pleats around it. You get to the very back. We've got these gorgeous cartridge pleats.
Again, you know, this is a time of excess and detail, you know, trimming, sewing techniques that create all these little elements. We really appreciate you coming. This has been wonderful for us, and I hope for you. We wish to give special thanks to Lizzie Hathaway White of Gloucester Cathedral, who arranged for us to conduct our workshops at the cathedral, and also introduced us to Lizzie Johansson Hartley, the curator of Gloucester Museum, who was so generous with the collection. Many of the museum's pieces are still in the process of being organized and fully documented, and hopefully conserved to bring more to the public in the future.
We hope you've enjoyed this behind the scenes tour with myself, Angela, and Brenda Rousseau. You can find the links to the cathedral and museum below. If you're a UK resident, please consider donating for the preservation of the collection. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you've enjoyed this video. And until next time,
Happy sewing!